Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into the GSMC Relationship Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And I am your host, Giovanna. Guys, it's a late record for me today. I'm back at work. I'm sure a lot of people are in the same situation that I am in. So holy moly, it's gonna be a time, but you know what, we're gonna get through it, and we're gonna have fun, because today we're going to be talking about Pride. I'm so excited. It is June, and this entire episode is going to be about Pride and the history of Pride and what happened, how you can celebrate Pride during a pandemic, Pride, excuse me, Pride in the news, and then lastly, we're going to end with 10 companies that you can support this June that support Pride and LGBTQIA plus all year around. So we're going to have a lot to get into today. I hope you're excited. Phew. Tell you what, when I was researching this, I knew quite a bit about Pride history, just because I am a bisexual person. So, you know, it's something that I have been interested in. But you know, I dug a little bit deeper, and there were some stuff that I didn't know that was actually made me sad. Not gonna lie, and mainly the things that I didn't know about, I guess, was the history of Pride that happened before, everything that led up to the initial thing. If you don't know, that's what I'm going to get into right now. Basically, on June 28th, 1969, at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich City, New York City, Greenwich Village in New York City, holy moly, there was a riot. And basically because the Stonewall Inn was it was a happening gay bar at the time. But what I was interested in finding out was what was the history that led up to that, because you know, for things like this, for big social movements, you know, there's a catalyst, sure, and that was the Stonewall riot, but I wanted to know, like, what was going on before all this, like, what led to this. And tell you what, internet's a fantastic thing, because I found out quite a bit of stuff that I didn't know. It turns out, after World War II, people were, basically they wanted to return to a sense of normalcy. You know, people were coming home from the war, and they just wanted to normal families, a normal society, everything like that. But after World War II, during the Red Scare, gay and lesbian people were placed on the blacklist by the U.S. Department of Security because they believed they were especially susceptible to blackmail. So, a little bit different. So, both the World Wars had a really big influence on gay and lesbian society, queer society, at that time. Basically, when World War I ended, there was a big move. A lot of young people moved to the city because everyone was coming home, and they wanted to take advantage of, I guess there was some sort of help with the army of moving to the city. So there was a lot of young people who were moving to Greenwich in particular, and it became actually during World War I, there was already beginning to have a very big gay and lesbian population. So that's World War I. World War II, again, I just mentioned about during the Red Scare, there was, communists, anarchists, and gay and lesbian people were not, they weren't good people in the eyes of the government. In 1950, the Senator Clyde R. Hoey noted, "It is generally believed that those who engage in overt acts of perversion lack the emotional stability of normal persons, and all the government's intelligence agencies are in complete agreement that sex perverts in government constitute security risks." So this guy was talking about like gay and lesbian people, and that's not even the worst part. In 3 years, between 1947 and 1950, 1,700 federal job applications were denied, 4,380 people were discharged from the military, and 420 people were fired from their government jobs for being suspected of homosexuals. So it wasn't even like proven, which, that's bad enough that people are getting fired over over their sexual orientation. But the fact that they were only suspected of that, that many people lost their jobs because they were considered, quote unquote, a security breach. So all of this is happening in the background. Meanwhile, in New York City, the police are, this is in the 60s, but homosexuality is considered illegal. And they would do that by saying, they would make it illegal to, you couldn't wear clothes that didn't match with your biological gender. So like what I found on that is that women had to have at least 3 articles of clothing that were considered female for them to pass that like thing, I guess. And then if guys were dressed in like drag during raids and gay bars, they were arrested just immediately. But I thought it was funny where women in particular, they needed at least 3 articles of quote unquote female clothing, which I thought was funny. Like, I don't know what constitutes like, okay, she has a bra. That's one. Great. Like, does she need like pantyhose? I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know. That just didn't make sense to me. Anyway, another law that was passed is the quote unquote solicitation for homosexual relations. So I guess that just means, I don't really know, I guess what that means, but what I just considered is like, okay, if there are 2 people of the same sex, just like maybe touching or kissing or, doing anything that is considered romantic, that was solicitation of homosexual relations. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, during the 1960s, though, the government in New York of the city was really cracking down on gay bars and gay people and lesbian people and just queer people in general. And actually, because the mayor at the time the World Fair was coming to New York City in 1964, and he wanted to like clean up the streets, and he didn't want the gays around, basically, which is just funny because if you've ever been to New York City now, I don't know, it just tickles me. But basically all of these things are happening, and then we haven't even gotten to the part where like people riot at Stonewall. So gay bars were not allowed to get liquor licenses. But that didn't stop them from getting liquor licenses because the Italian mafia got involved. They saw a paycheck here, and basically they owned specifically the Stonewall Inn. I believe the Italian mafia owned other gay bars as well, but they definitely own the Stonewall Inn. And basically I believe most of the managers and the employees there like weren't queer at all, and a lot of them were a part of the Italian mafia. But what the mob did is one, they would work as security, and two, they would pay off the cops, and three, they would get liquor. So what a lot of, when these gay bars were raided, they were raided for, operating without a liquor license, or like selling alcohol without a liquor license. So that's what they were getting, these bars on, because they weren't allowed to even get a liquor license. So, on June 28th, 1969, 10 New York police officers raided the Stonewall Inn for selling alcohol without a liquor license. Gay bars at the time were the only safe haven for queer people. And the cool thing about Stonewall is actually that, there was gay people there was lesbian people there. There were drag queens and kings. For those of you who don't know, a drag king is someone who was born a woman who will like dress up like a man. Like drag queens are typically men who will dress up as women. There were trans people there, and also there were there was a park right across the street where a lot of homeless people would sleep, and so there would be homeless people who would go to the bar too. So it was an equal mix of Hispanic, white, and black people. There was mostly like late teens to early 30s is like the demographic that you were looking at. So mostly younger people. But other than that, really racially and like economically diverse. Not so much economically, I take that back. It was mostly poorer people, but still, it was a really diverse place, and this was the only place that people could be completely open with their sexuality and with their gender identity and things like that. And the other thing I forgot to mention is that because the mob owned these bars and they were illegally operating, gay bars were like not in great shape. So like what I read is that the Stonewall specifically didn't have running water. So you may think, but Giovanna, it's a bar. How would they wash the dishes? They didn't really wash any of the glasses. They just had a tub of water, and they would just like stick the shot glass in, or whatever, or the martini glass, or whatever you're drinking from, and just kind of swirl it around in the water, and then just immediately reuse it again. So, super, like, eco-friendly. Not, perhaps, like, healthy, but what are you gonna do? Also, there was no fire exits, which is going to be important later on. But yeah, so like I said, at 1:20 in the morning, June 28th, 10 police officers, they got a warrant even though they were paid off, by the mob. They raided the place. And the cool thing about Stonewall is they had all these like crazy, things to stop. If they were to get raided, they had all of these things set in place. Like there was a dance floor, like a dance room that was always lit in black light. But if the cops were coming, they would like turn the lights on normally to like white so people would know to like, okay, like everyone stop, touching each other and stop, maybe try to run for it if you can, kind of thing. And they had like liquor down the street in cars. So if the cops came and took all the liquor, they would be able to get the party started quicker because like, oh, we have, frickin' Frank and his, Chevy down the street, and we can just get the vodka and start the party again. Let's go. But that's I just find it interesting, all the crazy ways and the speakeasy type things that they were doing. So the cops raided the bar. Immediately they lined up everyone against the wall, and they had female cops go into the bathroom and inspect trans people and drag queens for their quote unquote correct gender. Yikes, not great. But, as this was happening, they were kicking people out and arresting people, and this obviously created a scene, and, eventually there was like a whole bunch of people outside. There was like 100, 200 people like in a crowd on the street, when crap really hit the fan. But, what actually started is, there was a drag king. Her name was Stormy. She was getting handcuffed, and basically the cops like hit her over the head. And, she basically just yelled out like, is anyone gonna do anything? And that's when your girl, Marsha P. Johnson, who is a black trans woman, threw, the shot glass that was heard around the world, at the Stonewall Inn's window and shouted, I got my civil rights. What a freaking babe. So now just all hell breaks loose. Like people are like, all of the people who were in the bar are like throwing, pennies and bricks and, glasses at the police. And, at one point, the police actually had to run into the Stonewall Inn, to, like, take cover, essentially. And going back to the fact that, there were no fire escapes, the inn actually caught fire while people were inside. And so people were, like, trapped inside, and just, it was insane. Basically, that was the first night. Just because like all that happened the first night, like the cops retreated, and then, but they were just riots for just just days after. And, there was only like 100 to 200 people when it first happened. But, by the time that, on the first night, there was 10 officers and 500 to 600 supporters outside the inn, but by day 2, there were multiple NYPD precincts involved and around 1,000 supporters inside and outside the inn. And, those 1,000 supporters, they're the ones who, did the riots for just days after the original raid happened. So you may be wondering, okay, so the Stonewall riot happened, and that's why we now have Pride in the month of June. But what happened, like, what did they gain from it? Don't worry, I looked up that too. Basically, within 6 months, 2 gay activist organizations were formed and 3 newspapers were created to promote LGBT rights. And within a few years, gay rights organizations were founded around the world. So, before, there was no, these gay bars were the only place where people could, be open with their sexuality. So what these organizations did and what these riots did and creating pride and having pride parades and things like that was basically just a way for these people to be proud that they were out of the closet and, openly, homosexual. Because of these riots, they were able to organize, these things that promoted, education, that promoted, just acceptance, Because before, like I said, like with those quotes that I mentioned before about like, you know, homosexual people not being like sexual perverts and not being real people, like they were just promoting like, hey, we're normal, you know, because like there were studies that said at the time, in psychology, homosexuality was actually in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostical Statistical Manual that psychologists use to diagnose mental illness. So it was just under wide just belief that homosexuals was actually if you were homosexual, you had a mental illness, that something was wrong with you. So there was a study that was done that everyone believed at the time in psychology that the reason why people were gay was because of a traumatic childhood experience, and that made them afraid of the opposite sex, and that's why. But then there was another woman who did a different study, and she basically compared homosexual men to heterosexual men, and based on their happiness, and they said that their happiness isn't different. Like these people are both the same. Like homosexual people are still regular people. There's nothing wrong with them. Like they're just normal. So that was definitely something that they had to fight for. Obviously in the 60s, there was a lot of other social justice, movements going on. You know, there was a lot of crazy stuff happening in the 60s. And the Pride was no different. Except when, the AIDS, HIV, epidemic happened, Pride was used as a thing to fight for it because the government was completely ignoring HIV AIDS and people who were affected by it and not helping because it was considered, you know, a gay disease or, you know, an invalid disease. I don't know what you want to call it. And then it was used as to protest the right to marry whom you love. And so yeah, Pride throughout the years has been used as different things. Like at first it was just like, hey, we are here and we are human and we're proud to be here and we're proud to be who we are. And then it slowly evolved over time based on the adapting needs of the times, really, you know. So that is the history, not complete history of Pride, mind you, but it's definitely a nice 20-minute overview for you. If you've never heard the Stonewall Riots story, it's definitely interesting and makes you sad, but I think it's very important for everybody to know. It doesn't matter where you are, what type of sexual orientation you have, and that kind of thing. But that's all I have to say about that. But on our next segment, we are going to move into more current times. How can you and your partner celebrate Pride this year when there is currently an epidemic and most Pride parades, as they are traditionally held, have been canceled and all that fun stuff. So we'll be right back after a quick break.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
we're back. Thank you guys so much for tuning back in. In this segment, we're going to be talking about some creative ways that you can celebrate Pride when there's a global pandemic happening. Not ideal, but we're just going to go with it. And I hope you stick around later on because we are going to be discussing some Pride news that's in the news. And then in our last topic, we're going to be the 10 companies that you can support now that support queer people and all year round, not just in June, which I know is an issue. But yeah, so you want to go to Pride, but maybe you're immunocompromised, your partner is immunocompromised, or you're taking care of someone, or you live with someone who's immunocompromised. I get it. I know some places have done Pride parades or are going to be doing Pride parades, but at least near me, they're pretty much have already been like canceled ahead of time, which sucks because this is my first year that I'm like actually out and comfortable, where I could have gone to Pride. But yeah, sometimes it just gotta be next year. And yeah, I mean, there are ways that we can celebrate Pride, you and your partner, just you yourself, and still be safe. For one, there's, if you're financially able to, there's a lot of different, LGBTQIA, places that you can donate to. And then also, there's Netflix just dropped. They're going to have a Pride section. Queer Eye just released their new season. Jonathan Van Ness is life. I can't. I'm so excited to just cry every episode because listen, if you've never watched Queer Eye, the original or the remake, tell you what, I think I've cried every single episode. If you don't cry for at least one episode, like I'm not kind of, I'm not overly emotional. I'm pretty emotional, but I tell you what, I cry every single episode. But yeah, and super stylish way. I was looking at some masks today with pride flags on it. Really want a bisexual pride flag mask. Would be awesome. But yeah, awesome way to celebrate Pride just by doing that. And they are doing a virtual Pride event that is going to be hosted by the drag queen Peppermint. That's going to be on, basically, it's called It Gets Better, a digital Pride experience. And that's going to be a 3-day event from June 24th to June 26th. There's going to be tons of performers. There's going to be speakers, all sorts of cool stuff. And then they are going to release, who's coming, later on down the road and get more specific with guests and things like that. So if you're interested in that, you can go to itgetsbetter.org and check out all the fun stuff that they're going to be doing there. And you know what? Even if you can't celebrate Pride and you are currently in a relationship, this might be a really nice time for you and your partner to really just appreciate there is so much work to be done. There really is. But, I mean, just think about, 15 years ago, there was a law, there were some states where it was illegal for people to get married and, of the same sex to get married, and you had to cross state lines to get married. I mean, I know that there are different parts of the country and there are different parts of the world that may be not as accepting, to, people in the queer community as other parts. But if you are out, and even if you're not, I think using this Pride Month to be introspective and to look into the history of gay and lesbian people, trans people, like asexual people. Look into the history books, because I guarantee you there's probably going to be someone who you identify with in history. There were many historical figures I can think of in like kings and queens who were bisexual or gay or lesbian. There are, I believe there is some, I'm not sure if it's completely proven, but I believe William Shakespeare was bisexual. See, I know all the bisexual people because I'm bisexual, so my bad. But for example, I didn't know the woman who coined Pride as we know it today was a bisexual woman. So I'm willing to bet that if you look and, listen to podcasts and read books and check out documentaries this Pride, because we can't really go out, in huge crowds to celebrate, you really might find some connection to somebody in history. And I think that's really cool. Also, if you want to have a Netflix and chill time with your babe, there's going to be a lot of movies out there, that are, gay friendly, pride friendly. I mean, everyone's going to think of Brokeback Mountain, but like, there are other ones too. For example, I mean, Moonlight, which is, won the freaking Oscar. So you can watch that, and that is actually on Amazon Prime Video if you have that. Some shows like Orange is the New Black has a lot of queer characters in it. I haven't seen this show, but the half of it, that one is actually on Netflix. And Netflix just put on The Life and Death of Marsha P. Johnson. So, throwback to the history of Stonewall. That's a documentary that goes, and covers her life. So I haven't seen that one either, but I will absolutely be watching that. It looks amazing. There's Appropriate Behavior on Vudu. That one is about bisexuality. Could you have guessed? And then, A Fantastic Woman, stars an actual trans, actress. So that's another thing where, personally, I am an actor, and, a lot of problems with, media right now is that trans characters will be played by people who aren't trans, which, is not great. So it's definitely always great when when there is a movie out there that, is about a trans person played by a trans person. I would definitely give them, your patronage and watch the movie. But yeah, so again, that one in particular is A Fantastic Woman, and it's available on DirecTV if you do have that. Blue is the Warmest Color. That one, I don't know if it's streaming on anything, but that one is a classic from 2013. If you're a lesbian or bisexual woman, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, have a Netflix and chill night with your bae, because yeah, we can't go to Pride, but we can watch super gay, prideful movies, okay? Sometimes it's just what you gotta do. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm probably gonna rewatch all of these movies. But, another fun thing for, if you're a spreadsheeter or a techie, as they say, Google, spreadsheet program actually has a little hack that, if you put each letter separately in the top of, the spreadsheet cells, of Pride, so like Pride, like at the very top, Google Sheets takes on the colors of the Pride flag. So now, all of my spreadsheets are going to be in, Pride colors this week, cause that is fun. So yeah, that's another way. Oh, and also this is like kind of silly, but, on Snapchat, you can actually, if anyone even does this anymore, I made sure to change my Bitmoji, and she is now wearing a Pride shirt, and she has a little bi rainbow over her, and I just thought that was like the cutest thing. I don't know if that makes me sound like really young or really old, because I don't know if like Snapchat is the thing anymore. I don't know. You can tell me if I'm just like being weird, but I feel like I do have to talk about this as someone. So basically, I would say keep in mind that I can only speak from my own experience. I am someone who is bisexual. When you grow up bisexual, it is easy for you to not think that you are queer. Because, for my sake, I liked guys. So I was like, great, I can work with that, you know, like, I like guys, like, I can be, quote unquote, normal. But, you know, I would always joke around saying, like, oh, yeah, well, when I go into college, I'm gonna have, like, you know, my experimental phase. But, you know, little did I know, I was kind of serious. But, the thing is, like, for me, when I was trying to but understand my sexuality, it was tough for me because I feel like I didn't belong in the queer community, because, like, currently right now I'm dating a man. And so I felt like I didn't belong there, and, I didn't want to, take away someone else's thing that they worked so hard for. And, I can only speak from my experience. If you see someone at Pride who, is presenting as a heterosexual couple, keep in mind, before you get angry, that there might be bisexual couples there. There may be asexual couples there. And that's okay. They are allowed into the queer community too. But it's tough for me to grasp, you know, especially because I date men. That I always feel like, oh, well, I only half of me belongs in the queer community. And it's that kind of thing that is exactly why we have Pride. You know, and sometimes when I date, and now when I date, I'm very open about my sexuality. Some people will say some people are uncomfortable with it, and yeah, that sucks, but it's like, I can't blame them, you know, it's like, because I don't want anyone to feel less than, and I don't want to encroach in a space that isn't mine. And I think that's the one thing with Pride. If you go there, if you go to Pride, if you participate in Pride, do it with an open heart, no matter what sexual orientation you are. And I think that's what's most important. Be there to help. I feel like even with, if you are someone who is an ally and you want to participate in Pride, donate if you can to Pride organizations, and maybe when things are a little bit more normal, you know, you can hand out water, you know, to those people who are marching. You know, I've seen some insane costumes. I mean, they got to be getting hot. It's June, but yeah, if you participate in Pride, just keep an open heart. Remember that there are people who are in the queer community who may present as heterosexual people. And speaking for someone who, you know, I don't look like someone who's queer. And so I won't go on too much more about that, but I just want to say happy Pride, and I hope if you take anything from this episode today, remember that there's enough room for everyone to be accepted, I guess.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC podcast. Thank you for returning. Just recently in this last episode, we've talked about the history of Pride, and we've talked about some things that you can do during Pride when there's a pandemic going on, and it might not be extremely safe to go out and celebrate Pride. In this next one, we're going to be talking about Pride in the news. I tried to make this light as possible, but unfortunately today's date is June 12th. It was a little bit difficult to find uplifting stories, but what I hope can be taken away from this segment is that this is the reason why Pride exists. These next news stories. There is some controversy about why does Pride even exist. There are things going on in this world that requires Pride to exist. So, and these are some of those things. The first one comes from NPR, and this is going to discuss transgender rights. So some of you may have heard the law. It is illegal to discriminate on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability. Now, in 2016, gender identity was included under the umbrella term of sex. So before, it was simply you cannot discriminate against someone if they're a man or a woman. But after 2016, trans people were included in this, which is a great step. Obviously, because trans people exist and they need to be included as they are people. Just today, on June 12th, the current administration has rolled back on that law, saying that gender identity is no longer included in the discrimination of sex. Now, what does that mean? And how does it affect people? I'll tell you why. Specifically, for trans people, that now means that healthcare and insurances, or insurance providers, can refuse care at a doctor's office, or can deny health insurance. I would imagine it would work similar as a pre-existing condition. This is especially problematic considering we are currently in a global pandemic. Now, another little tidbit is that Black people are more commonly they are more likely to die if they contract COVID than white people are. Now, let's say you are a black trans person. You get COVID. Let's say you go to the hospital. Now, let's say you are denied access to health care, so you don't have insurance. And let's say you might go to a hospital that there's a lot of Catholic-run hospitals, and they refuse to help you because it is against their religious belief for them to help you. Now, what do? You have racism coming after you. You have transphobia coming after you. And you have economic oppression coming after you. So that is why it is especially problematic. Is incredibly unfortunate that transgender people are viewed as a stranglehold on the system. And it makes me sad. And I just wanted to talk about that because, as we learned earlier in the podcast, Marsha P. Johnson was a black trans woman, and she was the one who started the riots at Stonewall. And it's, oh boy, guys, we just gotta hang in there. The next episode, or the next news piece I'm going to talk about, this one comes from NBC News. This came out about a week ago, so not as new as the NPR one was. But this one actually comes from Philadelphia. There was an adoption agency that was in Philadelphia. It was a Catholic adoption agency that was rejecting gay couples. They went to lower court. They were sued because of this, and they went to lower court, and they unanimously lost the case in their lower court. So they appealed it to go to the Supreme Court. This is it's called Catholic Social Services, and it has been rejecting same-sex couples for a while for, adoptive parents. And just recently, they are taxpayer funded, mind you. And just recently, when they brought it to the Supreme Court, the current administration submitted a brief to the Supreme Court saying that their religious rights were being infringed upon for refusing gay couples to adopt children. Now, if kids need homes, and these parents, no matter whom they love, are loving, and they have the resources to take care of a child, and they want to take care of a child, why aren't we giving that to them? I mean, I don't get it. We're really, at this point, we're only hurting the kids, and obviously we're just crushing the dreams of these, hopefully future parents who want to have kids and they can't. And so what are they going to do? They're going to, be in the system until they're 18 and not have a family, because there are parents who want to have children, but they're told that they can't have children because they're gay. It's not great, guys. It ain't great, fam. But yeah, so it's unfortunate, to say the least. But this is Fulton versus the city of Philadelphia, and and the other thing that really gets me on this one is that this is a taxpayer funded thing. I feel like that might have some infringement upon basically the separation of church and state. I don't know about that because I'm not a lawyer. But it makes me sad because I guess I just know so many people who want to be parents so badly. I knew someone who she married a man who he was paralyzed from the waist down, and they spent so much money to have a baby on their own. And man, you just see the desperation, not the desperation, but like, you know when a family wants a kid and when a couple wants a kid. And if you've ever been in that situation, you know what it's like. And it makes me so sad that these kids need a home and they're refused to be given a home. And these are the things that you see in the news, and you may wonder, why is pride a thing? Why do we need to fight for gay rights and be open about it? Well, these are the things that happen where couples who are gay are treated differently from couples who are heterosexual. And that just simply isn't right. It's just not. Like, people who are different just from the quote unquote norm. It's unfortunate, y'all. But I was able to find some good news. Some really awesome stuff is there may be another quote unquote rainbow wave. This article came from NBC titled "Another Rainbow Wave. Dozens of LGBTQ political hopefuls are on the June ballots." And they said that there has been at least 68 lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer candidates are on primary ballots across the country. And that just happened this month. So there's definitely keep an eye out. Another thing that's really important is voting in local elections. No matter what your political party is, it is so important to vote in your political or vote in your local elections. Like, obviously everyone knows about the presidential elections, and I really hope you're voting in those too, obviously. But keep an eye out if you like this episode. I'm sure there's going to be some people who really, really hate it, and that's okay too. But keep an eye out on local races that are going around you, and just talk to your local politicians, because they might be some really interesting people. As I'm sure these 68 people are, because there does need to be more representation in general. This one, though, is pretty interesting. This one is from Bustle. It's titled "How Therapists Are Failing LGBTQ Millennials." Basically, where this comes from is younger queer people who are seeking counseling and therapy have found that it's really difficult to find a therapist that believes in their sexuality. So the article opens with a story about a 25-year-old who went to see a therapist to talk about a potential toxic relationship. And the therapist wanted to focus on her bisexuality and asking her if it was a phase. She was very comfortable with her bisexuality, and this wasn't a phase. And even therapists who are supposed to be understand, the most recent human experience that's been going on. And even counselors and therapists fall victim, to some dated thinking. So a lot of millennials, and specifically people in the queer community, are turning to less traditional forms of therapy because a lot of therapists think LGBTQ sexuality and gender is quote-unquote trendy. Here's something from the article. Although acceptance of the LGBTQ community appears to be increasing overall, according to a Gallup poll revealing the public's opinion on gay and lesbian rights, there's still a learning curve for older generations who didn't grow up with the same awareness of gender fluidity or the spectrum of sexual orientations. And therapists are not exempt to that. And then for someone, I've used therapy online, like I've used Talkspace before, and I found that you can easily change your therapists on that one. The thing with Talkspace is that they didn't take insurance, but they do work. I know Talkspace and BetterHelp can do sliding scale, and they can use deals. And if you find that you're having trouble paying for that kind of thing, if you just like email their like financial like credit billing department, basically I told them, I was like, my account is like $0 right now and I can't pay this. They actually gave me like a month for free. So that was really cool. I have pretty good experience with that. I guess it depends on what you're looking for, but, couples therapy is also, can be very helpful. I honestly don't know if they offer couples therapy online. I would imagine that they do in the age of COVID, where there's teletherapy and things like that, where if you and your partner would like to see a counselor, and if you're a queer couple, especially, I think it would be smart to do some research into your therapist. That's something for me where I'm actually still kind of struggling to find a regular counselor, a regular therapist, that I'm comfortable enough to talk to about my sexuality and things like that. And it's tough if you are a queer person, and I can relate a lot to this article. Because, it's not something that you realize that other people are experiencing until you read something like that. So yeah, if you are interested in that, I would recommend that, article on Bustle. So yeah, I think therapy is really important. I've never gone to couples therapy. I'm a weirdo and I love psychology, so I would totally do it. But, I feel like we would all learn a lot, and I'd actually love to interview a couples counselor on this podcast. So who knows? But yeah, it's definitely interesting. So if you are a queer couple, or just even if you're not, like, do some Googling on, if you're going to a clinic, if you're going to an office, look at the bios, see if you can email them before you make an appointment, because that way you can see where they stand. You can be like, hey, we're a gay couple, and we wanted to come into your session and to make an appointment with you. Tell me about some of what you're most interested now, and tell me about some of your educational history and things like that. And maybe that way you can get a better idea of where this person lies, and if they're going to be open to your sexuality, to your gender, because it's very important that if you're going to see someone who you want to get help from and you want to get counseling from, that they see you as a whole person and not someone who is quote unquote going through a phase. Yikes. I do want to end this segment on a positive note, as best I can. But there has been two pretty cool laws passed. One has been in Jacksonville, Florida. So this is actually kind of interesting because there was an LGBTQ plus anti-discrimination law that was passed 3 years ago, but it was overruled, and they have just been able to pass it again. So what this law does is it makes it illegal for people to get fired, any discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. So kind of going back to the first news story I was talking about, but this is actually just in Jacksonville, Florida. Also in Japan, this is really interesting. Japan has just passed a law that makes it illegal to out a queer person without their permission. So this one is great because outing a person before they're ready can lead to some very intense feelings, and basically it has led to quite a lot of suicides, especially in younger people, because if they're not ready, someone needs to be able to come out on their own time, because if they're not ready, that could have severe effects on their lives, with their families, with their jobs, because unfortunately, because of the, for example, with the first news story that I talked about trans people losing their right against discrimination, it's important that people aren't being outed before that they're ready, because there's still work to be done. Until a person does not have to come out, that's when it will be not okay to out someone. It has, gay sex in Japan, has only been criminalized, briefly in Japan's history, actually, and has not been legalized, and gender identity and sexual orientation remain taboo in Japan. So this is a big step for Japan. It seems like, they have been doing, it's been only very recent that they have been focusing on the queer rights and queer fighting for everyone to be equal. But it seems like in Japan, according to this article, that they're making a lot of strides in a short amount of time. So that's quite good to hear. But that is going to end the segment, but I'd love for you to stick around because we are going to talk about, I can tell you some companies that you can support this Pride, who support Pride all year round. I see a lot of, every year you see companies that will plaster, the pride flag all over their t-shirts. But what are they doing for the rest of the year, So, these are some companies that your money is going to the right place.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. I'm so happy you decided to come back because we're going to be talking about shopping and things that you can buy that you will feel good about because you know that they're supporting Pride all year round. Some of these things on this list, I've used a culmination of lists and blogs and things like that. So two of them that I'm going to get into now is actually underwear products. I have used one of two. The first one is Tomboy X. They sell underwear. And yeah, so that's really great. But I'm going to talk about MeUndies because I love MeUndies. I wear them all the time. But yeah, that's another one that celebrates Pride all year round. They actually, in their ads, will have queer couples in them because they have cute matching underwear that you can get. I've got it before. I got lounge pants that I wore. They're like threadbare now. Like I just had them on at all times. But, usually for the month of June, they have like different prints each month. And I try to find, each month, like, oh, what are the new things they have? But usually for the month of June, they do like, Pride underwear. And I was just on there the other day, and I'm pretty sure they had, like the rainbow undies that you could get as well. Another really, great makeup brand is going to be MAC. MAC Cosmetics is actually, they will donate, basically, they have a big philanthropic, section of their company, and they actually donate a lot of their proceeds to, the MAC AIDS Fund. So that they have actually donated more than $450 million to organizations that support health, wellness, and rights of the LGBTQ plus community. And they launched a Pride, line. So you can get, like a Pride palette and a lipstick, and like, it's so much fun. If you're a person who wears makeup like me, MAC is, it is more of a luxury brand, yeah, but you know that when you're spending that kind of money, at least they're putting the money towards a good cause. So if you can afford it, I would highly recommend, buying it, especially if you want to go on a little shopping spree, this Pride month. Another amazing company is, a tribe called Queer. Basically, this woman, her name is Sabine Maxine. She, makes everyday t-shirts and like graphic tees and stuff like that. And she is a Black woman, so you will be supporting a queer Black woman, and a portion of her proceeds are going to be donated, to organizations like Black Lives Matter and Project Q. And if you don't know, what Project Q is, that's another, great one, because it is a nonprofit organization that provides free gender-affirming haircuts, self-empowering workshops, clothing, food, hygiene boxes, internships, job placements, mentorships to LGBTQ and homeless youth. I first heard about this on, a podcast, where she was actually, interviewed, and, she's just an incredible lady. So definitely, you can go to her website. Again, her, company is a tribe called Queer, and, you can pick out some of your favorite t-shirts and get your t-shirt on, baby. This next one is another clothing company. This company is called Torrid. I have ordered a swimsuit from there before, and I loved it. It is a women's clothing brand, but it specializes in inclusive size clothes and accessories. So there really is a size for everyone. I'm a curvier girl, so I really appreciated their swimsuit collection. But their company is donating 20% of proceeds to GLAAD. GLAAD aids its efforts to advocate for better representation of the LGBTQ community in the media. So that is really cool. These next two, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to be really excited about. The first one is Reebok. So Reebok has actually donated $75,000 to the It Gets Better project. What the It Gets Better project does is they help out, youth of the LGBTQ, community, and, supports them because, obviously queer youth are at an extremely higher risk of dying from suicide. So that's a very important, organization, and, go Reebok for donating 75 grand to that. Another one is Target. So Target, it has a pretty snappy Twitter feed as well. So definitely, you should order from Target, and, yeah, but they've gotten some, clash in the news for, I'm pretty sure it was being boycotted at some point by people. But the retailer has pledged a donation of $100,000 to GLSEN, I haven't heard of this one. An education organization that champions LGBTQ issues in K through 12 education. So pretty great. If you are a real spicy millennial that probably had an emo phase, you probably own a pair of Doc Martens. Sorry if I called you out. But they created a special Pride print boot for Pride Month. And they are also donating $25,000 to the Trevor Project. So that's another one that helps with suicide prevention for LGBTQ youth. Banana Republic. Another good, what do you call it? Like, the mall, chains, I guess you'd say. They are offering a limited edition Pride collection and are donating $60,000 to the United Nations Free and Equal Initiative. This next one is Fabletics. That's another one. I like Fabletics. I've gotten their leggings from them before because I can't have leggings without pockets. And ladies, or really anyone who wears leggings, if you haven't tried leggings with pockets, it's going to change your life. I pretty much only wear leggings, and I'll fight whoever says that leggings are pants. No, I won't. That's not good. But you get the point. But they're Kate Hudson's activewear brand created a bright new Pride collection and promises to donate 10% of the capsule's net proceeds to the It Gets Better Project. So we talked about the It Gets Better Project before. ASOS is another clothing brand. That's another one. They have really cute clothes on there. I've gotten like going out clothes and like bar hopping clothes from ASOS actually. But they have teamed up with Glad to create a Pride Month collection with 100% of the sales from the collection going to the nonprofit. That is amazing. So ASOS is another one. I haven't used this brand, but I love it. I haven't used this brand, but I've heard of it. This is Bombas Socks. I know though that for Bombas all year round, if you buy a pair of Bombas socks, they will donate a pair to a homeless or person in need. And for Pride, they will be donating socks to a person in need in the LGBTQ plus community through the Ally Coalition. So that's another one that helps because a lot of kids who are in the LGBTQ community can get kicked out by their parents' house or wherever they're staying because their parents or guardians don't agree with their sexuality and just are homeless and they have nowhere to go. So that's really important. This Converse. Oh my God. I used to strictly only wear Converse. So this makes me happy. They have dropped a 2020 Pride collection and that is going to benefit the It Gets Better Project, LA Forney Center, Bagley, and Out Metro West. And to date, Converse has donated $1 million in support of local and global LGBTQIA+ organizations. That's amazing. As far as these other organizations go, the only other one I've heard of is the It Gets Better Project. So great. And also, I have been getting a mix of these from blogs and stuff. But the one that is giving me most of the information of how much they are actually donating is fastcompany.com. But some other contenders has been UGG, Nike, Morphe, my bad. I know it's a makeup brand. I just don't know how to say it. And then, Levi's. So, these are all brands that are supporting, Pride all year round and LGBTQ, IA plus, stuff. And they're really putting their money where their mouth is, basically. So these are brands where you can buy all of your things that you want for Pride, and you know that your money is going to a good spot. And that, my friends, concludes the GSMC Sex Podcast. We got into a lot of stuff. We got kind of deep. I try not to get so political, but it's hard in these times. I hope, I feel like if you don't speak up your silence speaks for you. And for me to, I guess me not being political, it could be very political for other people. And I really try to, be open and that kind of thing. But I hope, if anything, you learned a lot from the history portion of the podcast, and you maybe bought some stuff from these companies that are really donating to some amazing organizations and really putting themselves out there. Or if not, just those, now you know the companies that you want to avoid. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. It's getting hot out there. It's summertime. So go get your tan on, but make sure to wear sunscreen. And I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. You know what would be super cool, real cool, if you guys could subscribe maybe, because that really helps us out a lot. And if you could read a nice review, even if it's to make fun of me. I plan to not read them because I'm scared. But if they're good, you can also talk to me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So yeah, I would have preferred the mean comments maybe on the iTunes review, and then like the nice ones on the Twitter and the Instagrams. Just kidding. Anyway, thank you all and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.